Hi, welcome to the Creative Industry Insight podcast, a podcast that takes a look at the various roles in the creative world. I'm your host, Bobby. Today's guest is Dom Tuohy, a BAFTA and Oscar-winning SFX Supervisor, whose credits include 1917, The Mummy, and Captain Phillips. So make yourself comfortable, relax, and sit back and enjoy the conversation that I have with Dom. How are you, Dom?
I'm very well, thank you, Robert.
Yeah, how are you feeling?
Very well, thank you. Looking forward to your questions.
Yeah,
and, I'm hoping that I can answer them for you.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. It'll be interesting. You've been around the block quite a number of times, and your CV is nothing to sort of scoff at with what I've been looking at and some of the videos I've seen on YouTube with you being interviewed. So hopefully I can handle it to a higher standard and see what sort of gold we can mine with you, what sort of nuggets we can get, and hopefully you can inspire a couple of people with what you've got to say. I think we should start off with what is SFX and what does an SFX supervisor do?
What my job is I'm the special effects supervisor. The special effects supervisor on the projects that we work on is anything that's in real time. That's what we get involved in. So if it's to do rain effects, we supply the rain. If it's to do wind effects, we obviously supply the wind. And then obviously it gets more complicated as the effects change. We start to use more equipment and it gets more difficult. But basically anything in real time is what we are trying to achieve. And the art of what I try to do is to try and make it look believable. So as we've all grown up, we all know what rain looks like, and the trick is to make it look like it's raining for real. And there's lots of tricks that we try to use to make this work, because believe it or not, real rain doesn't show up on camera. So our rain is much heavier than you would see for your normal day-to-day rain. So that's my goal. My goal is that we try to create the effect in real time for the actors and for the actual shots to make it look real.
What would your job look like in pre-production? Is it you given a script and do you break it down with, okay, so for example, this scene is exterior day and it's raining or there's fire or whatever. And do you mark that down and start breaking it down? Or are you just having a continuous conversation with the director, DOP or other people involved into seeing what they sort of want? Or is it more just, okay, this is what I need to do and this is what we're going to go with?
Yeah, I mean, what normally happens is you start a project, they give you the script, you read the script, and that for me is the most exciting time, because at that time no one is trying to restrain you in what you want to try to achieve. So like you've just said, we get the script, we read it. I like to read the script from top to bottom with all the characters, with what they say, so I get a feel for the story. And then obviously you start going into each scene and you start breaking down what is required for your department. And sometimes it's quite straightforward. Someone's walking through a forest and the early morning mist. Well, obviously that's going to be us, because we're going to be doing the early morning mist. Other times you think you've broken down the script and you realise that you go into the cave, for example, and you don't expect there to be a lift. So you don't think, oh, well, I'll make an allowance for a lift. You just assume that he's going to come into the cave by going down a set of stairs. So you try to get a bit of a game plan together, you break it down, and then from then you start to work out how long you've got to be able to achieve these effects. So what happens then is normally you get on board with the production. The production, you meet each department, and they will then start saying to you, "Oh, do you realise that in the back cave we've got a lift?" And you change your notes to suit. And then the producer will come along and say, "Okay, well, look, you've seen the breakdown. You've met the art department. How much is this going to cost?" and inevitably they always tell you that it's too much money, and you start to look at your list of requirements, and they straight away will say, oh, don't worry about the early morning mist, we're not doing that, and you wipe that out. So you're constantly updating that list to break down the script, and then you get to kind of a bit of a happy medium where everyone is aware of what you're trying to achieve, and you agree that this amount of money should be spent, or you say to the producers and the directors, look, I think that we can do something really cool here, and this is worth spending the money because I think you're going to get great production value out of it. And for me, that's what the job is all about. It's about trying to do the smoke and mirrors of special effects and get the best that you possibly can, because you only get one go at this. That's the beauty of making films. And you're trying to make something memorable, but you also want it to be memorable in the right instance. You don't want to build a great big hydraulic gimbal, for example, and then when you see the film, you can't see why you used it. So for me, that's my job title, is to make sure that we're being respectful to the film and respectful to the public watching it, that you really want to see the best that you possibly can from our department.
Do you get a lot of creative control over your ideas, or or is it coming down to, does it come from the top down, that they say, actually, we want something like this, what can you produce? Or does it come down to as well with budgets?
I think it's a bit of both. I've been very fortunate. I've worked with quite a few people now, and we've this for the second and third time. So you get an understanding, and they understand what you can and you can't do, and what your strengths and weaknesses are. And they will already have kind of said to a director, "Oh, Dom can build this rig for you. He's done this before on this project. So sometimes there's an expectation of when you turn up that you're going to build them a rig, you're going to do something specific for that. And then the director's very keen to know what that is. And other times I've been quite vocal, and I've kind of said to people that there's no point in building this gimbal, for example, if you're not going to get production value out of it. And the funny thing is certain directors want the gimbal to be there, for example, if you're in a spaceship or if you're in the interior of a car, because they want their artists to actually feel like the vehicle is moving, and they want their artists to react. And that's like I've said before, that's what it's all about. It's about getting the best for everybody. So sometimes we make something, and it's because the director wants to feel like he's really in a spaceship or really in this moving car, and the fact that it's shaking around or moving gives the realism to what we're doing.
What has been the sort of biggest fight when it comes to these sort of, if they say, I want this gimbal, but you know for a fact that actually no, it's not going to look right?
I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say it's a fight. What I would say is, that let's do something within that environment that warrants what we're doing. So if it was just bouncing along, obviously we would build maybe something that was quite basic in its requirements. But if we want the car or the vehicle to do a loop-the-loop, then obviously we would make the rig to suit what you want to do. So that's where it's interesting, because you get a chance to talk to directors, and you get a chance to talk to the art department, and then that's where it evolves. Because we will say, for example, when we worked on The Mummy, for example, with Tom Cruise, we built a massive rig that was the interior of a A400 aeroplane that rotated 360 degrees. And I think we did 7 or 8 revolutions, all within, each revolution was under 7 seconds. And the set was massive, but we did that because we wanted to see the artists rolling around inside that set. So that was already discussed, and it was something that warranted what we did. So that's when it's great, because you could actually you can envisage what the shot is, and the director also can kind of go, great, well, I'm going to use this because of that. And that's where things evolve. So like I say, sometimes you read a script and you don't think there's anything in there that you're really going to get your teeth into. And then other times you can be surprised.
What I'm kind of interested in as well is the different use of special effects on different shows that you've worked on. So, for example, like Solo, Star Wars story, what would be the difference between that and a show like I Capture the Castle? What would, obviously, on something like Solo, there might be a lot more special effects compared to something a little bit more drama-based than action-heavy.
Yeah, I Captured the Castle, Billy. We went to the Isle of Man and we filmed that. And that was very much your physical effects. We went to the top of a mountain and we did rain effects. That in itself brings you all kinds of problems because, one, you've got to get to the top of the mountain, then you've got to get water up to the top of the mountain, you've got to store the water. So it's one of those things that sounds easy, but it can be a logistical nightmare. But on I Captured the Castle, we did that. We also did a wire rig where we made a clothes line be able to look like the actors were lifting themselves up into a void, but in fact we had total control over it. So that was pretty straightforward in that respect, and that's what was required on that show. On something like the Solo, obviously you're dealing in a different kind of film, because something like the Lucasfilm, there is lots of effects that pyrotechnic effects, for example, when the stormtroopers are all firing at one another, that you have to respect that there's a certain look that you need to keep to because that's what the fans want to see. But also there's an opportunity to maybe just slightly change things, to maybe give it maybe a bit more of a modern look to it. So I know that myself and the others that worked on the Star Wars projects, we all tried to put our little stamp on there if we could, but being very respectful of what we were doing. But like you say, those two films, they bring different effects between each project.
You've worked on a number of Star Wars films, and you worked on Mission Impossible film. I think it's Rogue Nation.
Yeah,
I'm correct. Yeah. When you're stepping into something that's already a series, you mentioned as well that you like to add your sort of own stamp. But do you usually get some sort of guide, or does somebody pass it back into you to be like, all right, it's down to you now to sort of continue what we've started? Do you ever think as well as like, how can we make this bigger and better? Better might not be the right word because it's quite disrespectful to the person previously. But how could you make it bigger and more like, oh yeah, have the Dom Tuohy stamp on it rather than whoever did it previously?
Yeah, I mean, yes, is the answer to your question. You're always trying to, I think for me, I'm always trying to do the best work that we possibly can. And I'm very passionate about what we do. And I want it to be right. So whether it's something that may be considered as being quite simple to do, in fact, they're normally the hardest things to do. So whether it's exterior smoke, or whether it's condensation on windows, for example, they're as difficult as building big hydraulic rigs, because people have a natural eye to saying, oh, that looks strange, or that doesn't look right, and they are not special effects technicians. They're just your average crew, because I think people know when something's right and when something's wrong. So when you get an opportunity to work on maybe the bigger project, it's almost, you've got to do the simple things right as well as the more complicated things. So the pressure is on. And when we worked on Solo, and when we worked on the last Star Wars, number 9, you're working with directors that have done this kind of work before, and you want to almost show them that the British film technicians are the best in the world. And I truly believe that. I think we've got fantastic technicians in the UK. And you want to show that we can do these effects efficiently, and in a budget and all of the restraints that they would normally have. So when we worked on Star Wars, for example, we did some very, very large water effects that were very impressive to the eye, and they really helped the scene. So I don't know if you remember on the Death Star, Kylo Ren and Rey, they were fighting, and we were doing all the big water cannons that were going around them. And part of the trick is to be able to continually do these water cannons and to be able to reset and go again very quickly, so that the actors can get into a flow because they're doing a fight routine. It was also very cold, so we couldn't get them as wet as we'd like to get them. So all of those things, you don't want to be the department that has got this wonderful water effect, but you can only do it once a day, because then it's pointless. Mission was the same kind of goal. Tom Cruise, in my opinion, is probably the most professional actor that I've ever worked with. And you know that it's going to be Tom that's going to be in the rig, and you know that he is going to want to do all of it. And that makes you, for me, for a special effects man, that's what the goal is. The goal is to make something look dangerous, but to be in a controlled environment and make the artists feel that they are in control of what's going on around them, and we are in control of what's affecting the artist. So Mission was a great one to work with Tom. We did lots of things where we strapped him to the outside of a large plane. There was car rigs, there was underwater rigs that we did with Tom. We've been very fortunate. I've worked with Tom Cruise on 3 projects, and each time we've shown our skills to him, whether it's been with pyrotechnics or been with mechanical rigs. So they are a great joy to do, and we get great pleasure from them. But in the same breath, I still get great pleasure from doing the simple effects on the lower profile films that look right. So, like I say, there is a pressure to deliver, but all the time you just want it to look right. You don't want it to look contrived, and I think that's the skill of a special effects man.
When you talk about like the simple things, what would you consider the simple things to be? Is that stuff like rain and the mist, or is it just something completely different?
No, I think the simple things, believe it or not, are breakaways. Are one of those things that aren't simple, but people think that they are. They think that you can just make something and you'll crash a car through it, or you'll I'll just make some breakaways. For me, they're one of the hardest things.
What's very breakaway? Sorry.
A breakaway is something, for example, if you're going to do a car chase and you want the car to drive into something and you want it to look spectacular because you want to believe that the car is breaking through a wooden barn or something like that. Well, there's a reality to physics that, yes, if you hit a piece of wood, it will break. But the reality also is that piece of wood may not break, and the piece of wood may spin round and get lodged into part of the vehicle, which then locks the steering up. And then next thing you know, the car is driven into something that you don't want him to drive into. So people think that that's the easy effect, but there's a lot of thought and a lot of planning that goes on. And then the other thing is that you want it to look like it has a body of weight. You want it to look like it's real. And that's where the difficulty is, because obviously physics plays a big part in what we do. And trying to cheat physics, you can't do it. So you're trying to make an object look heavy, but in fact be light. You're looking for an object to look solid, but in fact you pre-cut it and you've made it look like it's already broken, and then you've put it back together so that when it does break, it looks like a solid piece of rock, for example. So those effects are very difficult, and I would say are the most challenging, because there's a lot of R&D, research and development we call it, where you will practice, and over the years we've learned some tricks of the trade, but we're forever learning. I would never say that that every effect that we do is repeatable. I would say that it's everything that we do is different. It's got the same DNA that runs through it, but it's not exactly the same. So the simple things, I would say making things look right is what's simple, because you naturally, you look at it and you think, that doesn't look right. And I think that's the difficulty of what we've got to do, special effects men.
When you say about making things look right, say for example on something like Mission, because that is, we all know that Tom Cruise likes to do his own things. Everything has to be sort of, each film stunts get crazier and crazier, and what is the biggest issue on something like that to make it look right? And I'm also curious, what's the health and safety involved when you have to strap your star to a plane or put him in a car rig that's going to flip over?
Yeah, exactly what you just said. So if you look at Mission 5, which is one that we worked on, there's a big sequence that happens that's underwater. We did that at Leavesden Studios in the underwater tank there, and Tom wanted to do everything. I think he wanted to hold his breath for some 9 minutes, I think it was, which I think he actually did. But within that scenario, he wanted to look like that he was caught up in turbulent water and he was being moved and spun around. Well, normally you would probably hand that over to the visual effects department and they would do a digital Tom Cruise being spun in water. But Tom was very adamant that he wanted to be in the water because he believed that the way that the water would interact with his costume and his hair and his body movement, that it would look right. So we spent a lot of time building rigs that were submerged in the water, that we could manipulate Tom. But obviously, when you start doing things like that, you suddenly got to get health and safety involved, and you've got to kind of think about what the dangers are. And you've got to have a procedure where if something goes wrong, how do we react? And I think that's what I know that I try to do on everything that we do is I'm always thinking, if something goes wrong, how do we rectify that? And if I'm honest with you, that's where we start. We start with, okay, we want to put Tom in the water. We want to spin him 360 degrees, horizontally, vertically. We want to do it at speed. We want to stop the rig, but if we do, we don't want it to be violent with the stop. And then you kind of go, okay, then so how do we hold him in the rig? And then what we did is we made a system where we used electromagnets, and Tom wore a harness, and the electromagnets held Tom into the rig. And then the way we got him out of it is we took the power off of the electromagnets, and Tom was free. And that was how we made the rig safe. If there was no power going to the electromagnets, Tom couldn't be connected into the rig. And it proved to be a great system because we weren't relying on any mechanical rigs. We weren't relying on there to be mechanisms that release pins and all that. We just used the magnets because they're very strong to hold him. But that took a lot of time. That took a lot of R&D because it's easy to say, oh, we use magnets. But then obviously when you put them into the water, they start to do funny things in the water. You start to lose current. There's a whole load of things that start to give you problems, but because you test them early, you manage to find out what those problems are and you rectify them so that by the time we show a test to Tom, because Tom would never get in anything unless we'd shown a full test with his stunt double. And then once we'd shown it with the stunt double, then we would put Tom into the rig and he would do the effects. And then he would give us some feedback and he'd say, you mean, can I go slower here or can you make this go quicker there? And that was what the goal was.
When working on films, when you're doing the research, do you look back at titles that are quite similar in what you guys want to do? So obviously with Mission Possible, because there's 4 other ones, you can look back and see how certain things are done. And do you sort of watch it and think like how you can improve on those sort of things as well?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think Mission is a great one to talk about, because I think if you look at them generally from number 1 to number 6, they've done now. You can see that, in my opinion, that the effects have got better and better, and I think that's because visual effects have been able to help in some manner or fashion. They've been able to paint rigs out, for examples, which maybe they wouldn't have done in those previous years. So I think if you look at the standard of the effects as they've gone on, I think they've superseded one another. So I think, yeah, that R&D is the key to everything. Also, I think when you get asked to do a Mission Impossible, I know that I looked at those films and I was very conscious of not trying to do the same thing twice, because everyone would say, oh, they did that on number 3, or they did that. So, and I know Tom himself is very focused on that. Look, there's certain things you've got to do. I mean, a car chase is a car chase. He always loves a car chase and he always loves a motorbike chase, but it's trying to give the audience the storytelling of what's going on for Tom Cruise at that moment in time, which I think is what they've got better at doing, especially within the special effects department. But when we did Solo, Star Wars, for example, obviously J.J. Abrams was the director, and I did my homework there because he's done some fantastic films, and he is a great believer in doing it in real time. So I was very aware that when we started, that he was going to embrace that. So if I read something, I thought, well, we've got a good chance of trying to do this for real, and they allowed us to do that. We embraced as much as we could, and there's certain things that you're never going to do for real. I mean, it's just never going to happen. But that's been special effects, and I've got to say, is a pleasure to try and work on those bigger projects.
As you're saying, like, effects have been changed and got better and better. How much has really changed since you started on With Nell and I as an assistant? And then going through the years, what sort of projects did you notice, or what sort of years did you notice when things were getting different and people wanted sort of bigger special effects? And was there a time ever where special effects had to take a backseat and visual effects came in instead?
Yes, very much so. I mean, I think I started in '85, and like you just said, With Nell and I was a fantastic project to work on. At the time, we never thought that it was going to get the cult following that it has up to now. I mean, I believe people are still going to see it, but it was amazing to work on that project. It was, I think I've only worked on, I would say, 2 or 3 projects like that, where it was great fun to be on the set every day. It was a very small team of people that worked very closely together, and all the departments were helping one another. And so you had great memories of being on location and working with these guys and girls and making something. But if you look at With Nell and I would say that we did a lot of atmospheric effects there. I mean, the rain, and obviously Richard E. Grant was smoke coming out of everywhere, as if he was smoking, which was obviously a rig that we did on him. And then I think as the years went on, I would say that the mid-90s is probably mid-90s is when visual effects really it became the tool that was used within the film industry, and everything was done with visual effects. And I think special effects took a little bit of a back step from that, because they could do everything. And I think what was interesting is as the years have progressed from there, I think visual effects and special effects, I know for myself, in the last maybe 5 years or 6 years maybe, we've worked very much together, and visual effects are very vocal about the fact that they want us to start the effect. They want to feel that it's real, and then they can enhance it if they need to, or they can help us out. And I think that's what's been the success of filmmaking for us as a department is that working together and collaboration together has really paid off. And I think when you get it right, I think it's something that people don't question. And like I've said before, special effects is about smoke and mirrors, and it's about tricking the public, the paying public, that they are really in that moment, and they believe that they are in the scene. And I think for me, obviously, 1917 was the last project that we worked on, where there was a hell of a lot of visual effects that was added to what we did as well. And I do believe that it comes across really well. And I think that's when the two departments work together like that, I think you get a really good end result.
Going back to you mentioning on 1917, what was the sort of trials and tribulations of working with something where effectively it is in air quotes a sort of one shot, and they go on to different rigs throughout. When you were starting out on that project, how was that sort of sold to you? And then reading the scripts, is a war movie something that you always sort of wanted to work on, or how difficult would it be to work on a war movie with a lot of special effects and explosions and making it look realistic / safe?
Well, I think the funny thing about 1917 is that we only had the one memorable sequence where we did some very large explosions, and that was towards the end of the film. If you look at the rest of the stuff that we did there, we had a plane crashing into a barn. We had interior of the kind of the tunnels that were collapsing. So when you read a script like that, there's obvious things that you read and you kind of go, oh, great, that's good. I mean, he's going to run through a battlefield and there's going to be, and you think, fantastic, here we go. And then when you start to go to those production meetings, and Sam Mendes, the director, and Roger Deakins, I think they'd already had quite a few months planning out the film before the likes of myself got into any kind of conversation. So they already had a very clear kind of view of what they wanted to see and how they wanted to see it. So 1917, I don't think I'm ever going to get the opportunity to work on something as organised and so rehearsed as that. The process was amazing. We would be invited into a rehearsal with the actors. There would be only the departments that needed to be there, and the actors would actually play the scene, and the camera would actually do the move, and you could see from that rehearsal which way the camera was looking. You could see where the moments that it was really important for our department, for example, to get involved, and then you could really focus on those areas. And then, like I say, Sam Mendes was very positive about what he wanted and how he wanted it. We spent a lot of time, for example, in 1917, when George, the actor, is buried underneath the rubble, and Sam was placing rocks specifically to camera because he wanted the actors to pick up certain rocks to reveal his foot. I don't know if you remember it within the film.
Yeah,
but
they tripped the wire in the.
That's it. The rat trips the wire. But we like I was placing the rocks, and it showed me the attention to detail that Sam Mendes and Roger Deakins were working to on that, because we had to then, like for take two, we had to do the same thing, and it was very much like, okay, where's those rocks we put by his foot, and then it was like, right, let's make sure and we had continuity pictures, and we were given more time to place the rocks so that we could get the desired effect. So, yeah, 1917 was a fantastic experience.
With the continuity of rock placing and everything, I know that they probably helped you out quite a lot with being like, oh, actually, this one was here, this one was here. What happens on something, going back to Star Wars, where you're talking about the water cannons? What is the continuity on something like that? Is that just, okay, water gets projected this way? Or do you still have to, it's something like that's more difficult to sort of follow?
Yeah, no.
Compared to placing rocks?
Yeah, look, they're very similar. The water cannons, for example, whenever you're doing a fight sequence, it's like a dance. So the actors are dancing, and that there is something that they've got to repeat, because if they don't repeat it, they're going to get hurt. So for us, it was very important that within that dance, we got an opportunity to let off the water cannons that best showed our water cannons, but also was the best time within the visual side of what they were doing. So we were trying to do the water cannons. Every time they hit, there was a big explosion. And then we were trying to do it so that when there was the moment when, she kills Kylo Ren, is that there's this kind of quietness, and we don't want to be letting off water cannons at that moment. So you have to pay attention to what is going on, because like I said before, it would ruin the moment if all of a sudden you've got Daisy Ridley who's looking into the eyes of Kylo Ren, and all of a sudden bang, you'd kill the moment. So you have to have an artistic flair about what you're doing, and I'm a great believer that when it feels right, it normally is right, and people don't question it. And it's trying to see. So for us, for example, something like that, we already knew that the stunt department had rehearsed. So we were there at the rehearsals, and we would watch what they were doing, and we could see the fight unrolling. And then that gave us the opportunity of, on take one, I would say, right, okay, look, let that one off then. Let's do this one now. Hold back. Let that one go. And that's part of the dance. And then obviously they say cut. We would start to refill the water cannons, and then we would speak to JJ, and he would give us notes, and he'd kind of say, he'd either say, look, that one you let off there, don't do that again, or can you let that one off then, or can we move that one, or and you're kind of finessing each shot, and you're trying to make it look really spectacular. And that's the shame is that you get a moment in making a film, and the moment comes and goes, and that's when you are trying to get your special effects to be seen, and you want it to be seen because it's right. And that's what I think all special effects men aim to do, is try to put their little stamp on that particular shot, because that shot goes down in history. That can't be changed. But then it works against you, because if you're trying to always put your little bit into the shot, sometimes that's distracting, and they won't put it into the edit, and it doesn't go there anyway. So it's a fine balance.
When you're saying about it being distracting, adding a bit too much, have you had that yourself when you've been working on shows where you put things in and you've noticed it and you're like, oh, maybe went a bit OTT on that time? Or have you seen a show where it's kind of a bit like that and it takes you out of it?
No, because I think what happens is that just doesn't make the cut. So you might do it, and you'll know yourself at that moment in time. You think, oh no, yeah, that's too much. And sure enough, that they won't make the film.
So they leave it on the cutting room floor, and you're just like,
that stays on the cutting room floor. Yeah, you won't get that.
That little blotch.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You got it. You're constantly just trying to just be subtle about what you do. It won't make the cut for sure.
When you're doing a big bombastic scene, what is the sort of little subtle things that you like to add, or is it things where actually we're doing a big scene, the bigger the better? Let's just go all out. But if you want to do something more subtle, what's the attention to detail that you give to it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the attention to detail is what's going on in the background. That's where I will concentrate, because everyone's looking at the artist, everyone's looking at that foreground, but it's what's going on behind is what's important to me. Rain is a prime example. Whenever you're doing rain, you're trying to make the depth of rain as deep as possible, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to see where it ends. So for me, it's about blending, because obviously you have restraints of locations and you have restraints of all kinds of things where you can't do what you'd like to do just because of the physical side of it. So you do have restraints that you constantly have, but you're trying to blend in those effects so that the background, for example, the rain is still there, but you don't want it to see like it's the end of the effect. You want it to blend into that background. So for me, that's where every other special effects man is looking. He's looking at your rain and he's kind of going, oh, that's not very good. Look, that which is there. So you take pride in things like that, and you don't want to give away the smoke and mirrors. I know I keep on saying it, but that's what we do. It's all smoke and mirrors.
Is there a lot of friendly rivalry between you and other SFX supervisors on? It's friendly, as a friendly rivalry, not necessarily like.
Yeah, look, I think that I personally think that the British special effects department he has a lot of respect for one another. I think that there's a new generation that has grown up being friends, and I think everyone is there to help everybody. I do believe that if you win an accolade, it's basically saying, look, we've got fantastic technicians here. I know that's how I look at the accolades that we've won. I can't do it on my own. I'm very, very fortunate. I've got a fantastic team around me of boys and girls that are very dedicated to their profession, and it's a team effort. It always will be a team effort, and without that team, you can't do anything. So is there a rivalry? No, there's not a rivalry. Are we sharing things that we're doing? I wouldn't say we're sharing, but what I am saying is we don't hide from it. We want our department to be efficient. We want it to be professional. So there's standards of practices that we use, which we all use the same standard of practice. And I think that's great for the industry, and it's great for our profession. And I think it's one that has been installed in us over many years, and I think it's still being installed in us now. So look, I think we're very fortunate. If you look at the top special effects supervisors in the UK at the moment, I think they've all got some kind of award that they've won, and quite rightly they've won them for some amazing films and some amazing effects. And so I think we're very lucky in the UK.
How big is your team usually? And when you're working on a big project with a lot of people, what's the best way of you sort of leading your team, and how do you trust them? I'm guessing you do have like a recurring people that you kind of have on your team.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, each project will change in size. I think 1917, I think there was 35 of us that was on 1917. I think on solo we were up to 70 people. But what you have to remember is that that's spread across many departments. So there is a core crew that have worked with me for many years now, and we have a tier system within the setup where we have floor supervisors, workshop supervisors, we have what we call lead technicians, we have senior technicians, trainees, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to distribute the work between those guys, knowing their strengths and weaknesses, and girls. We've got some girls working with us as well, and you distribute that work between those people so that you can achieve the end goal, which is making it look right.
What's the difference between like a floor technician and a workshop technician?
The floor technician and a workshop technician. Obviously, within the workshop, you're in I suppose the easiest way to put it, you're in a factory environment. So you're with mechanical machinery. You're with special effects is so broad. So we go from carpentry through to fiberglassing, through to electronics, through to engineering, through to electronics. I think I've said that already. but we've got many kind of fields that we work into. So the plan is to try and get a team of people that have all of those knowledge with them, and we try to embrace what we've learned on other jobs, and we look into new technologies as well and embrace that. And that's what we're constantly trying to achieve. So depending on which film you're working on, you may not need certain departments working with you, but the idea of a special effects man is that you should have knowledge of all of those effects and all of those restraints. So within the workshop, that's the kind of, you're making it, you're building it, you're doing your R&D. Then you get the floor side of it, and the floor is where the film is made, and that brings out a different skill in certain people, and that brings out a continual change in environment of which you have to constantly adapt to. So you need to be skilled at what you know you can achieve and the time restraints. So they're different skills, and sometimes those people don't pass over. Sometimes I've got guys that work in the workshop environment, and that's where their strengths are. And likewise, sometimes I've got guys that work on the floor, and they don't not as strong in the workshop environment. So that's the difference. Anything that says floor supervisor, for example, is working on the floor. If you're within the workshop, you'd be the workshop supervisor. So the trick is trying to get a balance of people that can work in both environments.
When you mean floor, is that set on the set?
Yeah, that's the set. Yeah, that's what we call the floor. Yeah, I don't know where that originated from, but we call that the floor, which is the set, whether that's on the stage or on location. But yeah, that's the difference.
What do you prefer, working in the workshop or on the floor? Or is it just a mixture of both, depending on
I get great pleasure from the job. I know personally I prefer the floor. I think it's an opportunity to put your stamp on a particular scene, whether it be as simple as wetting down, for example. But you get a chance of there and then in the moment to keep special effects going. And I think it's a really difficult job. But likewise, I think working within the workshop is really difficult as well, because most of the time we've got very tight restrictions on the amount of time that we have to make something. So you're not only you doing your R&D, but you're making it, you're testing it, and you're doing all of that. And sometimes in a shed. I mean, there's no glamour with the film industry. The workshop is sometimes it could be in the back of a stage or in a car park, or it's wherever you can build the rig. Sometimes you're building rigs on location in the element. So they both have skills, and they're both very difficult. Like I say, we try to make our environment one that is comfortable to work in, but we also have set up a system where we can work anywhere in the world, and we can bring the equipment to that location, and within a couple of weeks we can have a workshop set up and ready to go, and we can start making.
You own a lot of the equipment, or is this just something that you rent out through suppliers that you've met over the years?
Some of the equipment, I own all the equipment. A lot of the equipment is bespoke to the film industry. You can't buy wind machines, for example. They don't exist. So a lot of the times you're using technology from other industries. So if you look at the swamp boats that are in America, they use a big blade to propel themselves along. So we've used that system to make our wind machines, as an example. If you look at microlight paragliders and stuff like that, we've used that system to make smaller wind machines. So we're constantly looking at other industries to try to create an effect within the film industry. So wind, for example, there's your source to what you're trying to do. Rain effects, for example, how do you make these big rain spinners? Well, believe it or not, we use a system that they use in the fire brigade for dousing fires in rooms, where they push a big steel pipe into a room and it sprays out water. But it doesn't work for the film industry. But what it does do is it gives us probably 80% of what we want. And then we've got some very skillful men and women that say, right, okay, well, if we use that and we make an adapter, or we make something that makes this spin, and then you start to make something that is really bespoke to the film industry and is really effective. And that's what we're all trying to do. We're all trying to look at how we can make things easier for ourselves, lighter and easier to work with. Because, like I say, the film industry moves at such a pace that you need to be able to react quickly. So if you do need to be able to do a rain job, and you're going to be doing it in the centre of London, and production only have the location for one day, you need to be able to go in there in the morning, had it ready for the afternoon, filmed on, and then all taken apart and put back in the van by the end of the night. So that's what we're trying to achieve. We're just trying to make what we do more efficient.
When sort of getting all these parts and everything, do you have to import a lot of them from other countries? Or do you ever get weird questions like, why do you need, what are you doing with this fan, for example? And also with the rain, do you just use water for that, or is it a special also liquid to make it a little bit more sort of thicker?
No, so do we get parts from all over the world? There's certain things that are made, they're not made in the UK. So you're going to America, or you're going to Germany or Europe, or you're going somewhere like that. And likewise, there's certain things that are made in the UK which we use. When we're doing rain, for example, the difficulty is with rain is that we use a lot of water through the rain rigs, and the difficulty is storing the water. So the other problem that you have to always be conscious of is that you are normally putting that water over the actors and over the crew. So the water has to be clean. So you are constantly monitoring your water. So we try to use fresh water all the time. If we keep water for more than so many days, we'll get it constantly tested to see if there's any bugs or anything in that. And we can move. We've got some very large water pumps that can move thousands and thousands of litres of water a minute. And half the problem is once you put it into the air, you need to allow the ground to be either to drain away, or otherwise you'll flood the set. So there's a lot of time and effort that goes into not only where we're going to get the water from and how we're going to store it, but when we put that water down on top of the set, where's it going to go? Because we don't want to flood the set out and then you can't film, or we don't want to flood the location that we're working at. So a lot of consideration is taken into when we do things like that. Obviously, you've got to think of the weather. If it's in the summer, then great. But if it's in the winter, what we don't want to do is we don't want to put water down and then it freeze. I mean, just for the health and safety of the crew and everyone around, we don't want ice everywhere. But yes, fresh water is what we would use.
Have you ever flooded a set by mistake? The drainage has been wrong on the stage, or has there been any little accidents that's happened by mistake?
I think I would say that have I personally flooded a set? No. Have I known of other productions that had? Yes. And I think that's where the film industry is good and bad, is that unfortunately you always hear of other people's mistakes quicker than they themselves have. So I think you're constantly trying to think of what could go wrong. And luckily, we've been very fortunate that we've not done that. Have we got close? Yes, I'm sure we have, but not intentionally have we flooded a set.
I want to go back to when you were saying that you were 2 or 3 projects that you thought were quite special. I'm going to take a wild guess that With Nail and I is one of them. 1917's Upper. What's the third? Or is it something that you can't talk about because you're working on it at the moment?
No, I mean, when I said 2 or 3, I think maybe it's 2. I've worked on loads of projects where I've really, really enjoyed working on them, but they've not been successful. People haven't liked them for whatever reason. And it's only probably with Nail and I 1917 that people are making acknowledgements for. So it's very difficult when you work on something and the general public likes them. And you get people coming up to you saying, oh, I really enjoyed that, or that was really good. And that's what I mean by that. I've worked on loads of films where they've gone, oh, I really like that. And someone says, oh, I don't really like it at all. I thought that was rubbish. And look, they have their opinion. You have to respect that. But like I say, probably with Nail and 1917 have been the 2 films that I'm sure everyone doesn't like it, but majority of people have enjoyed it.
Is 1917, is that the first time that you got award recognition?
No, we've been very fortunate. We got recognised for working on Solo, and we got put forward for an Oscar on Solo, and then the following year we got recognised for Star Wars Episode 9 and 1917. So we went to the BAFTA and the Oscars, being nominated twice in the same year for a category that has 5 films that are in it. So we had a 2 in 5 chance of getting something. So I felt very privileged.
Was there ever a worry that, because we've been nominated twice, might slightly get overlooked, or the vote might get split between the 2 shows?
Yeah, look, who knows? I mean, I think it's always very difficult to pick which film is going to be successful. I think 1917 for our department, I think was quite an easier. I think it was easier for people to make the distinction between special effects and visual effects on that film. I think there's other films that were out there, for example, that. What you have to remember is the awards for the BAFTAs and for the Oscars is we come under visual effects. We don't come under special effects. It's the visual effects category. We share that with visual effects because of what we do together. But a lot of the time, people are, especially on the Oscars, they have what they call the bake-off. And the bake-off is very clever. They use the Visual Effects Society, and they vote on 10 films. And those 10 films are voted upon by the board of the Visual Effects Society. And it's a big group of people. And they basically acknowledge the amount of work and the effort and the technology that's gone into that film. And then from the bake-offs, they go from 10 till 5. And then from those 5 films get put forward to the Oscars. And then the Oscars as a group, they have their members and they vote on what they think is the best film. So the BAFTAs is different. The BAFTAs is a group of people from all departments that vote on that film. And they, I think, like true film people, they vote on what they think looks right. And I think 1917 won because I think it just looks right. People didn't question it. I think that it just looked right. The Oscars, on the other hand, I was very fortunate. I went out to the Bake Off and I listened to the 10 films that they do a presentation and then they do a question and answers, of which people ask you questions about how you did things. And the technology that was used in the Visual Effects Society for The Irishman, as an example, was groundbreaking. They use ultraviolet lights and 2 cameras, and without getting too technical, it's the technology used to make the skin of the actors look younger is and will be used in the film industry, I'm sure. But unfortunately, it didn't win because, in my opinion, it didn't look right. I didn't think the actors looked as young as they should have done. There was just something that wasn't quite right. And I think that's why 1917 won, because it looked right. That's not to say that the other films that were nominated last year, like Avengers Endgames, weren't any good, because they were extremely good. Star Wars was another one. I thought it was some fantastic visual effects and special effects within that project. But unfortunately, the people didn't vote for it, and fortunately for me, 1917 won because for the third time it just looked right.
On the sort of bake-off scenario, do you prepare the presentation with the other people that you work with, or is it a studio thing that prepares it, and then go in with the notes that they've given you, sort of thing?
No. You prepare a written. There's 2 things that happen. One is they put a show reel together of the before and after of the effect, and then the visual effects supervisor and myself, we write a little bit about what we did, and you're trying to keep it quite simple. You don't want to get into too many details, but you do want to kind of give some kind of facts and figures, and then that's the presentation, and that gets handed out to everybody, of which they can view, and then that gets shown. Like I say, we went to LA and they showed it on a big cinema screen, and the visual effects supervisor stood up and introduced the film and spoke about certain effects that were achieved and how they did it. And you get a 10-minute show reel and showing the before and after. And then you get asked up onto the stage, and it's a Q&A, and I think you're up there for 25, 30 minutes with everybody in the auditorium asking you, what did you do here? How did you do that? And you are trying to represent your film and try to make people think that what you've achieved is worthy of the nominee.
I guess I have to ask, where were you when you found out, when you were nominated for both the BAFTA and Oscar? And did you expect to be nominated for like twice, or did you just think it'd be either one or the other?
Yeah, I think I was on. I think it was on Batman. We were when the nominees were announced, which was fantastic. Did I ever think that we were going to be nominated? No, not at all. But I did think that both Star Wars and 1917 were strong contenders and worthy of the bake-offs, because I thought they did some really good stuff. But no, look, when I went to the Oscars the first time when we were nominated for Solo, I think First Man won it. First Man, yeah, the Neil Armstrong film, and I remember being there, and I didn't think we were going to win for Solo, but I remember thinking this is very special, and I feel very honoured and privileged to be here, and I would love to have an Oscar. I mean, it's who wouldn't?
And now you can't stop bringing it to work.
Now I can't stop.
You empty your pockets, your wallet, your keys. Oh wait, his Oscar, his BAF, ready for work.
Yeah, and now I feel very, 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 very lucky. But like I say, it's a team effort, and I've got a fantastic team of boys and girls that work with us, and it's for them, it's for us, it's a team effort, 100%.
Because it must have been quite surreal when they read your name out and everything. But when you arrived there, like, how confident do you think you were going to win? Or were you just there to be like, you know what, I'm here to just soak up the evening, enjoy myself. Yeah. If we win, we win. We don't, we don't. It's still an honour.
100%. I mean, just being nominated felt a great achievement. Like I think I've said, that this is my 36th year working in special effects, and this is the second time that we got nominated. So, like I say, whenever you take on a film, you never know if it's going to be nominated. You just don't know. I mean, 1917 was made so late in the year, and the Oscars was brought forward that they did well to get it released so that it could be nominated. So you never quite know, and you. Like I say, we're just over the moon that we got nominated and we won.
I did watch 1917 in preparation for this, just to see certain scenes and be like, oh, okay, let's see how real it actually looks, and let's see what what sort of tricks they came up with. Do you ever sort of watch back on your shows and look at it and be like, oh, that does look, you notice the sort of little bits where it's like, oh, that's just off by a little bit? Or do you watch other films or TV shows and be like, oh, I would have done this a bit differently? Does that ever come to your mind?
I must admit, I try not to watch the films that I've worked on, because I can't watch the film for not looking at what we did. So I find that very difficult. I always like watching other people's projects. I try to never criticise what effects have been done. I'm always interested on how they did it and how they achieved it, because what you have to remember is films are made, and you have a moment, you have a window of opportunity for everything to align to be perfect for that one moment, and you may have worked on something and you've had the whole room ready to do thousands of bullet hits and things to break and all these kind of things, and you do the take and it's amazing and everyone thinks it's fantastic, and then there's a problem with the camera, or the actor didn't do what he was meant to do, or something wasn't quite right, and they say, okay, we're going to go again and we've got 20 minutes. What can you do in 20 minutes? And it's like, well, we can't do what we've just done there because that took us 3 days to get ready. So you're trying to make it look busy with 20 minutes of preparation, and that then makes the film. And nobody knows what you've done. I mean, I know personally that there's been loads of rigs that we've made on films that never get seen, and they're really cool. So I know that that's not just me. I know that that's every film has that. So I try not to criticise other people's work because I think it's not fair. But I can't watch my own stuff, if that makes sense.
So you go to like the premieres and cast and screenings, meet with everybody, and then just like pop out and then meet them for drinks afterwards, or is it just I'll give these tickets to somebody else?
No, look, I always, if we get invited to a premiere or anything like that, obviously, it'd be rude not to go, but I don't enjoy looking at our work because I do criticize. I'm very critical of what we do, so I can't enjoy it for the moment, which is what making films is all about. It's about getting lost in the moment and the and feeling like you are experiencing that emotion that the director is trying to get. So I can't enjoy it if I'm looking, oh Christ, that should have done a bit more rain there, or we should have done this, or that explosion didn't work, or I'm not enjoying the film.
Fair enough. There is a question I want to ask. When I was looking at filmography, there was a film that stood out to me because it was something that scared me as a youngster, and that was The Adventures of Pinocchio. There's a scene when they turn into donkeys, and that absolutely scarred me for life because it's just horrible. When working on a show like that where you have puppets, what do you have to be careful of when doing sort of special effects, especially with rain or mist or other things? Because you don't because technically the puppet is that star. It doesn't have feelings, but if you damage it, you're kind of stuffed because somebody's built it, and then, you know, who knows how long it could take to repair it.
Yeah. I mean, look, Pinocchio was. Anytime you're working with some kind of animatronic puppet, there is an infrastructure that comes with it that you have to work around and you have to respect. But that's what makes it interesting, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to work together within the departments so that it works. And like I said before, I mean, maybe Pinocchio is not a good example of that, but if it looks right, it looks right. So if you can allow that puppet to move within that set and do more than you really would, then that's what our goal is. Our goal is to try and make that work. I mean, they're interested in working with that. I mean, we had it on Star Wars. Obviously, there was Neil Scanlon, the creature effects supervisor. Star Wars is all about puppets with people walking backwards in suits to make them look like their legs are different shapes. With like 3 people in a suit, one sitting on someone's shoulders, one holding on to his legs, and you're trying to do explosions and bullet hits all around these people, and they can't see what they're doing. So you always have to be prepared to adapt on the day, and that's where the floor supervisor and that floor crew need to be aware of what's going on. So yes, there are restrictions, but everybody is trying to has got the same goal, and you're all trying to do the same thing. So yes, there's a lot of work that people don't see, and you're being respectful because you don't want to damage one of these things. And likewise, they don't want to stand on top of one of your explosions that you're going to do because they don't know that it's there, or they forgot, or something like that. So there's a lot of collaboration that happens between all departments of, okay, look, this is our weakness, this is what we can't do, what we do to make that work. And I think that's where the film industry is really good, is the adapting and making things work on the day.
I want to go to as well to Doolittle, because a lot of the animals were sort of visual effects. How do you get around knowing where the animals are going to be when you do your effects and making sure that it looks correct?
Yeah, I mean,
because I know that if with Star Wars it's puppets, but I'm guessing Doolittle it was a lot more green screen.
Dr. Doolittle was a project that we kind of knew what the animals were, and we knew the physical sizes of them. What our job was to do was to make it look like Robert Downey Jr. was actually riding Plimpton, the ostrich. So we made some mechanical objects that he could interact with. So that we made a very simple rig that allowed him to grab hold of the body of Plimpton and kind of try to ride it whilst it was moving. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to watch studies of animals and how they move. And then you're trying to incorporate that into the rig that you're building. And that's when it's really difficult, because an animal's movement is so fluid, and you're trying to not make it mechanical. So that becomes a big challenge. And also you're trying to make something where you don't want there to be a great big loom of cables that's controlling this thing, because then you can't move it into the set. Then you need power. So it's finding a solution that to try and tick all the boxes. So, like I say, we made a mechanical rig that was controlled by 2 special effects guys that were dressed in green, and they could basically maneuver the body of this ostrich, and it was on wheels, and it had a very simple mechanical movement to it. And with rehearsals, you could believe that he's interacting with it. So that's what we were trying to achieve. And we got involved in lots of things on Doolittle, where pretending animals were feeding from certain things and opening windows and doors. But the visual effects supervisor was very good in telling us what the shot was and what was required. And between us as two departments, I would say to them, do you want me to move that door for you, or do you want to move the door? And 9 times out of 10, they would be like, no, please, you move it, because then it's real. And we'll move the visual effects animal to it. And then there were certain times when they said, no, look, we can't do that. Don't put a breakaway door in there, because we can't paint the animal behind that breakaway door. But what we can do is get rid of the door and we'll do the lot. So it's a constant changing. And you work on certain projects and the visual effects people will say, no, we'll do that. You work on other projects and they say, oh, no, we want you to do it. So there's never a set of rules that you can work to. It's forever changing.
With like visual effects, how much harder, or is it become easier to do your job, or has it been harder to do your job?
I think
it just vary to what project you're working on?
I think it varies. It varies on. It varies from shot to shot. There's certain things that we could never do. We could never do it, and it's always going to be a visual effect. But like I say, the goal is to try to do stuff that people don't question. And I think if you can do that, then you're doing a good job. And that's what I think we're all trying to achieve. I think every special effects man is trying to do that. We're trying to just do something which just looks natural.
When it comes to picking jobs and everything, do you go for something that's going to excite you, or do you go for a job that's like, you know what, this is around, I'm going to take this and go with this? Or is it down to certain people that you get to work with? And do people need to sell you on the idea, or do you need to sort of pitch yourself?
I've never been fortunate enough to pick and choose what we do. We've been very fortunate that the industry is busy at this moment in time, and people have asked us to do projects that have got a high profile, and they, like I say, I've worked with them before, and they have kind of said to us, look, we're going to be doing this project, we would love you to be involved. We're going to be making this film next year. If you're not working, we'd love you to work. And we've been very, very lucky that that's managed to work out for us. So, do I know what I'm doing next? No. We're just going to concentrate on what we are doing and try to do the best job that we possibly can.
Is there anything that you specifically would like to work on? Let's say somebody calls up, it's like, do you want to work on? I know you've worked on big things, so it's kind of difficult to sort of pinpoint an example. But let's just say Tom Cruise turned around and said to you, "Hey, I'm doing a remake of Great Expectations. Do you want to be part of it?"
Well, I think ever since I was a young boy and got into this industry, pinnacle for the special effects department has always been a Bond film, a James Bond film. So, is there something that I would love to do? I think it's got to be a James Bond film. Chris Corbould has done, I can't believe, he's done nearly all of them, Chris. And he's, in my opinion, he's one of the top special effects supervisors in the UK. And I can't see him not continuing to work on them. But if there was an opportunity, then I've got to say a Bond film would be a fantastic opportunity to work on.
Yeah, do you have any idea how you could potentially top Chris on some of his scenes? Because I know he's one that springs to mind straight away is the tube scene in Skyfall, where he's actually the one driving it and it crashes through into the tunnel, and it's and there was a thing that I read, an article that they did an interview on him, and he was talking about that scene and how it just came to him in the middle of the night that he was kind of like tossing and turning an idea. Have you ever had that sort of eureka moment where you have something that's on your mind, it's on the tip of your tongue, but you can't just get there. It's not until, you know, you're about to fall asleep, be like, no, we should do this.
Yes, I mean, I think we all had those moments. I think when you first take on a project, you read the script and you think, oh, I know I'm going to do that, and then you'll be somewhere and you get the eureka moment where you go, no, in fact, that's not what we should do. This is what we should do. So I think that's the great thing about when you get the opportunity to read a script, is that you get moments where you can actually think about the situation, and then you get kind of a clear picture in your head that you think you'd like to, what they call, pitch that idea forward to the director, and maybe they would like that. So yes, I know where Chris is coming from. We've never been able to do something of that scale as a pitch of an idea like that, but yeah, look, I'm constantly getting ideas about how I'd like to try to achieve things and what we'd like to try to do. But everyone wants to do something that's never been done before. I think it's one of those sayings that said it within the film industry, but it's so difficult to find something that's never been done before. I think that's what makes the film industry so unique, is that we are constantly changing the style of how we make films. We are constantly changing how we do certain effects, and I think it's an exciting time for the special effects and visual effects to be working on projects, because I think that you know, we can do whatever we need to do to make it look right, and I think everyone is embracing that.
What advice, I think it's probably I've got a couple more things I want to talk about, and I'll probably wrap it up. What advice would you give someone starting out in your sort of department? And is there any advice that you'd give your younger self when you're working?
My advice is never give up. Never be told that you can't do it. Always be passionate about what you feel strongly about. Any advice that I would give myself now, I feel very lucky. I was very lucky to. I worked for a company called SFX Associates when I was 16. I wanted to be a sports teacher, believe it or not, but that didn't happen. I managed to. My father worked in the industry, but not on special effects. He was on the production side of it, and he introduced me to a guy called Martin Gutteridge. He had a company called SFX Associates. I managed to be a trainee for them and work with about 12 to 20 guys that worked for SFX Associates. A lot of them are special effects supervisors now, and we all learned our trade through SFX Associates. But what I was very fortunate is they were a family, and they treated everybody like a family, and I felt very, very lucky to be part of that family and learn my trade with really nice people. So I feel very, very lucky, very blessed that that's got me into this industry and has allowed me to progress to where we are now.
With you're starting out in SFX Associates, you were saying there's like 20 guys. Was it 20 trainees together, or was it people of different sort of levels?
Yeah, no, it was 20 guys of different levels, all bringing different skills to that team. Some were carpenters, some were engineers, some were electricians. And as a group of people, we embraced one another's strengths and weaknesses and learned from one another and became a really good team. And that allowed us to continue to work on many, many projects, with Nell and I being one of them. The special effects supervisor on that is Paul Corbold. He's a top special effects supervisor now. And we were two young guys learning our trade. Paul had been doing it, I think when I met Paul, he'd been doing it maybe 10 years longer than I had, and he said, come and help me, and I came and helped him to do the effects on With Now and I, and because of his generosity and his ability to teach you, I managed to learn my trade. So I'm forever grateful to Effects Associates and the team of people that worked there, and that's how I learned. I feel very, very lucky indeed.
All right, I'm going to wrap this up with, they're going to let you ask 2 questions to me. So you can at least to spice it up a little bit and put you on the spot with what you sort of want to ask, and wrap it up on there.
Ask you 2 questions about what? You
know what? Surprise me. I'll let you surprise me. But then, depending on what the questions are, I might just cut it off and go.
2 questions. Okay. Rob, I have 2 questions to ask you. The first question, what made you fall in love with films?
It's cliche, but I think what I remember is 2 from you growing up. There's 3 memories that I have. First one was I woke up from my nap when I was a kid. I must have been about 3, maybe pushing 4, and everybody in the house went to cinema except for my gran, and I was told I was too young to go see Jurassic Park. So that absolutely broke my heart, and I was really because at that time I was enjoying films, and I really wanted to go see that film. In my mind, because everybody's going to see it except for yourself, it's a bit gut wrenching. The second one is my dad took me to see Empire Strikes Back when I was 5, and I was like, wow, I can't believe this is what I've just seen on the screen. I can't believe this happened. And then I think the biggest one is probably when I rented out Back to the Future from the library. I was probably 8 or 9. I went with my gran, and she said, borrow any film you want. We can get one for the family to watch. She's like, great, I'm going to pick this one up. Come home. My mum has a go at me because for me, I thought Back to the Future was a brand new film. I'd never seen a cover or a poster, and this is probably over 20 years ago. So we don't have YouTube to watch trailers. We don't have, the internet we had was dial-up, and we can't use that until after 6 when it's free. So for me, the library was a place of getting film information. And yeah, she had a go at me and was really annoyed that I rented such an old film. And I remember watching it, and that's when I sort of fell in love and was like, wow, this is incredible. I didn't actually realise that I could actually get into sort of filmmaking until I was probably about 18 when I failed one of my subjects at school. Close to being kicked out because I didn't have enough grades to stay for the second year of A-levels. And then I managed to worm my way into staying in. And that's when I started sort of like actually taking a more keen interest in the filmmaking side of it, and sort of calling up places to see if I can get internships and work certain days or whoever. And again, like yourself, I've met some incredible people. I met people who stupidly trusted me to work with them, and sort of, even though I know the industry, they say it's not about what you know, but who you know. But even if you know someone and they put you in that position, it's down to you to repay that faith and, work hard and do the job correctly.
Yeah.
And I guess, I probably fell in love when I was about 8 or 10. And ever since then, I've been responsible with my friends group, with my family group, to recommend films and what to watch, what not to watch. And that's it, really, yeah. And it just snowballs, I guess. When you love something, it just snowballs. Especially, it's the same with football. You kind of want to, because there's such a rich history as well with film, that it's not something that's been happening for 10 years. It's, over 100 years, and you can literally, you look at the films that people say, wow, that changed my life, and then they can look at the films that see, like, wow, that changed the industry for better or for good.
Mm.
What's the last question that I'm dreading now?
Well, I was going to be serious now. I wasn't going to be serious, but I'm
no,
serious.
Go on.
No, so my serious one is what's the best film you've ever seen?
Best film that I've ever seen comes down to it's not just watching it, but I think it's also just the experience of it. And I think I've watched a lot of films, and there are certain moments, and I think the best film I've ever seen. Again, it's going to be cliche. I'm going to say Star Wars: Empire Strikes Back. That is the one that I remember first seeing in the cinema. That's the one I remember. My dad probably could confirm this. That I probably asked way too many questions about it and bugged him way too much about it. And then that's when I started loving Star Wars. Started collecting all the toys, the magazine, everything. Like even my bed sheets were Star Wars. And it's also I had an opportunity. They did a secret cinema a number of years ago, and they did Empire Strikes Back. And I took my dad to see it because it reminded me of when he took me to see it. And we watched it again. I think that was the first time we watched it again together.
Oh, wow.
That's from memory. That's probably, it might not be true because we might have watched it on the cuff another time.
Right.
Because that reminded me of so much that he took me, I wanted to take him. And he didn't realise it was like dress up, so he turned up in like jeans and a jumper. I was like, yeah, he was like the odd one out. But yeah, that's
great.
But yeah, anyway, thank you very much for your time and spending it with me on this. I know it's a really nice day outside, so I'm going to let you hop off and then enjoy the sunshine.
I'm going to put these back now.
Yeah, because this is an audio-only podcast. Yeah, Dom's actually just picking up his awards and putting them back into its place. I'm surprised his shelf can hold up so many awards. No, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure. Nice to speak to you, Rob. Good luck.
Yes, we do. Take care. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate and review this podcast. And join us next week where we'll have Oscar and BAFTA nominee Naomi Don popping by to talk about hair and makeup design.